All right, well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Reverend Jamie Hinson-Rieger. I'm the senior minister here at First Parish in Bedford. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here on Zoom and here in the sanctuary for this very important conversation about how we can collectively assist with the housing crisis that our migrant neighbors are experiencing here in Massachusetts. So I'm very happy to welcome Eric Siegel from ARC's Cluster, and the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, who will be joining us via Zoom. And for people here in the sanctuary, there is a clipboard where you can leave your contact information and your level of volunteer interest so we can add you to our contact list and get back to you. There's also an FAQ that is just chock full of useful information. If you are on a Zoom, if you want to leave your email in the chat and indicate whether you want us to send you the FAQ or you're interested in volunteer opportunities, please do that and we will follow up. We will also be recording this session, so anyone you know who would like to see it but who wasn't able to be here, you can find my contact information on the church website. I'm super happy to send a link to the recording to anyone who would be interested in seeing it, if you want to share it with small groups at your congregation or wherever that might be. So with that said, I am happy to just turn it over to Kathleen, if the tech team can work their magic.
So I just unmuted myself. Let's see how well you can hear me in the sanctuary. Is that coming through okay? Okay, good. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathleen McTeague. I'm a retired UU minister and extremely active with the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network, which goes by the acronym BEYON, B-I-J-A-N. You'll hear it pronounced many different ways. That's all right. We have been collaborating now for the last almost a year with the state of Massachusetts Office for Refugees and Immigrants in trying to address the escalating crisis of sheltering people who are arriving in Massachusetts. And BEYON as an organization has been extremely active with that. As an individual, my role has been to help recruit and support people who are willing to be short-term hosts of a migrant family. This ranges from a few nights to sometimes a few weeks or even a few months. And that's the model I'm going to talk about, but I want to let Eric also introduce himself so that you understand the two different hats we're kind of wearing. We collaborate very closely, Eric and myself, both working with the state and with one of the agencies the state has contracted with here in Massachusetts to help manage the flow of people. These are places they call family welcome centers, and the Brazilian Workers Center is the primary place where families are being welcomed and coordinated. I should also just say I am sick with COVID, which is why I have kept my germs to myself and joined you via Zoom. And my main symptom at the moment is exhaustion. So I won't be probably staying for the whole of this session. But we'll do whatever I can to answer questions while I'm here. Eric, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then we can toss it back my way?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kathleen. So I'm Eric Siegel, and Jamie introduced me as a member of ARC's Cluster, which is true. That's an organization that supports immigrants. I'm also a member of First Parish of Arlington. That's another relevant connection. So the type of hosting that Kathleen was talking about, that basically the state is urging people to open up their house to some of these folks who are living in the airport or at hospital waiting rooms, even for a couple nights at a time. So my family did that, and it was very nice, but we found it was really tough to then make friends with these people and get close to their kids and then say, okay, bye, you gotta go back to the airport. And in addition, it was kind of isolating. You know, you have these people in your house and you may or may not speak the same language as they do. And, you know, there were different occasions where we felt like, gee, we could use some help here. And so we started this idea of a cluster of a number of households that could work together. And so the family might move into my house for 4 or 5 days. And then, you know, maybe we need a little space, or maybe one of my kids is coming home or something like that. And at that point, they move to somebody else's house for a few days. And We recognize that that could be disruptive for the family. It's not that much fun to move from one house to another, but it's way better than sleeping on the floor at the airport. And so we've done this a couple times now. It's worked really well, and it's had the added benefit of us getting closer to the other households that are involved in this. And I'll say more about it later, but let me pass it back to Kathleen to talk more about it from her perspective.
Okay, thanks, Eric. So Jamie referenced the FAQ that has been put together over a period of months and is continually being updated and added to. I've put the link into the chat a couple of times so that anybody who joined later on can still pick it up, and Jamie has access to it as well. So if you don't get it tonight, you'll get it soon. Just let us know that you're interested in it. It is very thorough. It gives host families lots and lots of information before you decide to host. It also has emergency numbers and advice for people for after you do decide to host, so for while you're a host. So just to give a little bit of an overview of what's going on right now, I spoke with one of the staff people from the Office for Refugees and Immigrants just a couple of hours ago to get updated. Tonight, there are 90 families sleeping on the floor of Logan Airport. Almost all of these families have 2 to sometimes 3 kids, anywhere from 1 to 3. But anyway, the math being what it is between 300 and 350 human beings sleeping on the floor of the airport at Logan. They're on the airport at Logan because that's the only space that's big enough that is out of the elements to receive people. And they have to leave Logan at 7 a.m. every morning, and they are bused to one of the family welcome centers, some of which are churches. So they basically hang out all day. There's not a whole lot for them to do. The state is doing its very best to catch them up with services like getting them onto Mass Health, making sure that people who are ill get seen by a medical professional and so forth. But the basic crisis is that there's no place to put people. Many of you know from just reading the news that this latest escalation in people arriving here was actually triggered less by the border itself and what's happening there, and more by the politics between red and blue states. Most of the people arriving in Massachusetts are being bused here by Greg Abbott in Texas in an effort to make very clear to the rest of the country, especially what he views as sanctuary cities, his perspective on what he sees as the migrant crisis at the border. Massachusetts being what it is in terms of not having a lot in the way of low-cost housing, obviously this has created a huge crisis for the state because there just isn't enough housing even for people who are here that's affordable. And so what the state has done in response has been to open up a whole series of emergency shelters that are a step up from sleeping at the airport, but not a huge step up. People don't have their own individual rooms, for instance. They don't have access to a place to cook. They do have showers usually. And quite poignantly, one of the families who stayed with me and then moved on to one of these shelters told me that it was sort of like the airport, but it was much better because of having showers and because they didn't have people passing by taking pictures of them all the time. And the idea that you can't shield your children from being seen as sort of an interesting part of the scenery or an animal in the zoo is a part of what folks are going through at the airport, that they just have absolutely zero in the way of privacy. So the model, so just to say, given that situation, recruiting more hosts to be able to give people some respite care is in no way, shape, or form a solution to the problem. What it is doing is giving people a respite. It's giving them a little island of rest while they're still really on their journey to safety. And as Eric said, it can be very poignant and difficult and sad to host a family for a week, which is normally what we do, and then say goodbye to them, knowing that in most cases, they're returning to sleeping on the floor of the airport. On the other hand, it gives them a chance to live behind a door that can shut, which most of them haven't had for many weeks or even months, some privacy. It gives them a chance to relax in safety with their children, a chance to wash their clothes, to take hot showers, to sleep well and deeply, and to cook the food that they want to eat. And that altogether is a deep blessing for them, and people are very, very grateful for it. So as hard as it is for us to say goodbye when we hit our limit, what has worked for us is to take in multiple families a month or sometimes more than a month apart for a week to 10 days. And many of these, I'm fluent in Spanish, and so I can generally connect with people via Spanish, although we have housed some folks who only speak Haitian Creole. But for us, it has seemed very worth it to give people this respite. And the state is pleading with us to find more hosts who are able to do this for anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. There are no requirements of you as a host except that you have at least one dedicated bedroom. You don't have to have a whole floor. You don't have to have an in-law apartment. There just needs to be a bedroom that is dedicated for the family and a bathroom they can use, even if it's the same one that you and your family are using. I think I should probably pause there, Eric, because I don't know how, I don't feel like I can do a whole big brain dump without getting kind of lost in the weeds. So maybe I should either see if there are questions for me on this model, or we go to you. Since I'm not going to last that long, we could go ahead and see if there are questions about this model, or if people just want to hear about the cluster model.
If you have questions here in the sanctuary, I'll pass you the mic so that the people on Zoom can also hear the question. You just raise your hand. I'm happy to bring you the mic. On Zoom, you can raise your hand if you have a question, and we will unmute you and spot you.
Hi, Kathleen. It's Regina Correo from First Parish Concord. Could you remind me of what the CORI process is for families looking to host?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. It is in the FAQ as well for those of you who have that, but everybody who agrees to host fills out an application form, which is embedded in the FAQ. There's a link to it in the FAQ. It's a pretty simple, straightforward form. And that puts you on our radar. And generally, the next step is actually either myself or Eric contacting you to see if you have any further questions before we move you ahead in the process, and to make sure we understand everything we need to understand about the space that you're offering and the length of time. Then you're moved into the database, and somebody from the Brazilian Workers Center does a CORI check. I can't, to be honest, remember what CORI stands for, but it's a background check to make sure you don't have a criminal record. And it is just a margin of safety to offer, because these are, of course, very, very vulnerable families who are coming through. They've suffered a great deal of trauma already. The CORI check is fast-tracked. The state has an agreement to move it very quickly. And so generally, once they get going on the CORI check, it's just a couple of days. And then depending on what date you've said you can begin, you'll hear from somebody at Brazilian Workers Center to tell you that they've got a family ready to be placed with you.
So this is the voice of Reverend Jamie. Just a reminder again, if you're watching this later as a recording and you need access to that FAQ for the CORI check form or whatever, feel free to email me at minister@uubedford.org, and I'm happy to send you that information. You can also find my contact information on the church website.
Why don't I go ahead, if that's okay with you, Kathleen?
There was one other question. I see Melinda has her hand up on Zoom.
I'm sorry, I just joined. I'm just interested in both models. At some point, I'm sure that'll be explained, but it would be helpful to have a sense for that, to be able to talk about it with our family. Thank you.
So maybe, Eric, you can go on into the, let me just say also, since I'm not going to last very long tonight, I'm going to also put my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out to me independently with any other questions that you have. If you don't find them answered in the FAQ, that's what I'm doing. I mean, it's just answering questions, trying to hold people's hands and guide them through this process. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay. Go ahead, Eric.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. You know, I thought it might be helpful for you to understand kind of the general timeline of most of these families. And Kathleen, if I say anything wrong, please correct me. But almost all of these families are Haitian, and they almost all left Haiti multiple years ago and went into Latin America. And they've spent time maybe in Peru or Colombia or Brazil. All of the folks that I've had contact with, besides speaking Haitian Creole, they also speak either Spanish or Portuguese because they've spent time and been working in those countries. And they arrived here legally. I forget exactly what the immigration status is, but there are certain countries that are allowed to come in, and the officers at the border were able to kind of make judgment calls, and as far as everybody can tell, it's kind of arbitrary. Some people get in and some people don't, but these folks are here legally, and therefore they are eligible to work. It's just a matter of getting some paperwork done, and the state has actually been fairly good. I mean, first the people came in and they were housing them in the shelters, and then when the shelters got all full, then they started going to the hospital waiting rooms in the airport and places like that. The state has been working pretty hard to try to get that paperwork done so they can get the work authorization. Once they get the work authorization, then they can get jobs and they can move towards independence, which of course is what everybody wants. I also think it's really important to understand that, I'm going on a soapbox here for a minute, you can tell me to stop whenever you want, but that we need these people. They're not a burden to the economy of Massachusetts. We need these people to fill the jobs, and I mean, the Globe had a study about this, and I mean, there have been studies all over the place that basically our economy is growing by the billions of dollars because of these people. And does anybody want to guess when was the last year that people in the United States had enough babies to keep the population stable without immigration? 1972 was the last year. So we really depend on immigration to keep our country going. Okay, I'll get off the soapbox here now. So as I mentioned, we put together this model where you have multiple households. Somebody stays with me for a couple days, then they go and stay with you for a couple days. And it's worked pretty well. I think that the questions that have come up have been very similar to the questions that come up with Kathleen's model, where basically, just to clarify the two models, Kathleen's model is the state sends somebody to your house, they stay there for a while, and then when you're done, they go back to the welcome center and back to the airport. And my model is that we kind of rotate the people. Does that make sense? Everybody understand that? Okay. And I think the questions that come up are fairly similar. One is language. It's really nice to be able to communicate with the people who are in your house. So to the extent that a lot of them speak Spanish, and I think a lot of us have kind of high school Spanish, and then here and there's people who actually speak it pretty well. I think it's pretty good to have somebody in your cluster who, if they don't speak Haitian Creole, they speak Spanish or somehow, because sometimes there are subtle things you want to communicate, and if you want to say, it's really nice that you cook dinner for me, but you don't have to cook dinner for me. I'll be fine if you don't. And that's on high school Spanish, that's kind of hard to communicate. So the language issue is important. Food, in general, we say I'll cook for myself and you can cook for yourself, and sometimes I'll cook and I'll invite you for dinner, and sometimes you'll cook and you'll invite me for dinner. But in general, we're not trying to all get together for meals every day. That'd be hard to coordinate. And at this point, we have a little shopping list of kind of favorite things that a lot of Haitian families like. So when somebody arrives, we go out to the store and make sure that there's chicken and white rice. And to be honest, some of the stuff is really great, and we have good meals together. And one of the favorite Haitian breakfasts is spaghetti with ketchup and mayonnaise. And I'm not that huge a fan of that, but I tried it and it wasn't that bad, but it wasn't something I want to do every day. But the great thing is, imagine that you could never have that breakfast that you like having every day. imagine you've gone months and months eating somebody else's stuff, and you finally get to have your spaghetti with mayonnaise and ketchup. It's like, phew, you know, what a relief, finally. Transportation, the state provides transportation. So when you say, okay, I'm ready, the state sends somebody to your house with the family. And in fact, the state would even bring somebody from my family to your family if we wanted them to, but it's a lot easier for us to just pack them in the car and bring them ourselves. I guess one other thing that's come up is, especially during the summer, we don't have the same capacity that we did during the year. A lot of college kids are home, they're filling up bedrooms. People going on vacation. People are saying to me, you know, like, I can have somebody for a week in July, but in August we're away the whole month. So our capacity is down. So we're being honest about that. And when our next family arrives, we're gonna say, you know, we're pretty sure we've got capacity for a month. After that, we're not sure. And you might end up going back to the airport, but at least you'll have a good break. One other thing that comes up, people ask, well, you've got 6 families in your cluster. Couldn't you be hosting 6 families for a few days instead of 1 family for a month? Wouldn't that be more fair? And yes, it would be more fair, but most of these families wouldn't do it. You know, we went out and asked and really tried to pull people in and said, you know, you can have a family for a few days, whatever you want, but most people wouldn't do it unless they were part of a larger support structure. So it's really kind of a false choice. It's not like there's these 6 families that would all take somebody in.
Eric, can I add a couple more things?
Yeah.
Just a few more notes. So Eric also said toward the beginning that one of the advantages of the cluster model has been that the hosts get to know each other better. And I think that that's building community in a way that's very cool. And I really appreciate it. Because I'm so tuned into the level of the crisis, I'm always trying to get more people to think in terms of being able to host as an individual host. And the most obvious advantage of that, as Eric just alluded to, is that more families get shelter for a short period of time. I would say that what we've been trying to do is build enough of kind of a support structure. Maybe sounds a little too grandiose, but one of the reasons that I sort of tell people I'm on call for you is in order to help people feel braver about being able to host on their own, because you're not really on your own. I mean, if you had any kind of a crisis, you have people to call and so forth. Taking that first step is always the hardest thing. My husband and I have by now hosted, I think, 6 families, maybe more. I have sort of lost track since November. And it gets easier and easier. We're more and more relaxed with not understanding everything that's said if they don't speak Spanish, for instance. We're more and more relaxed about things that used to puzzle or trouble us, like the fact that most of the families like to spend most of their time in the bedroom with the door shut. And in the beginning, I thought, I haven't been clear enough with people that they can use the living room, they can use the dining room, they can, you know, hang out. And of course, for a lot of the time, it was cold, and so they couldn't really hang out outside. But what I came to realize is that, as I said earlier, it's been so long since they've had even the slightest amount of privacy that to be able to go into a room and shut the door and be there as a family is profoundly precious for them. So we've just kind of relaxed about being able to have people in our homes. And I would also say there are people who feel comfortable enough to host a family for a few days to make sure that they understand the way the house works and all of that before they go on vacation, and let the family go ahead and stay there while they're on vacation. That's not everybody, but there have been a number of hosts who feel very relaxed about that. And so being on vacation doesn't have to be a reason you can't host. It's really just up to each individual person as to how they get people oriented and how comfortable you feel that you're able to do that. Excuse me. Go ahead, Earth.
A couple questions that I saw come up in the chat. What about school for the kids? So in my experience, most of the kids tend to be preschool. If they're not, then absolutely they have the right to go to school, even for a short period of time. And, they can register with the town. It usually takes a few days, but then they can go to school. Kathleen, have you found the same thing? Most of the kids are preschool kids?
Most of the kids are preschool kids. It's moot right now because it's summertime in any case, but even kids who are school age, we've had a number of families who have kids who are 8 and 10 around that level. They are not enrolled in school until they're in more long-term housing. So there are some hosts who have elected to keep a family with them for many months. There are a few of those. And in that case, the kids get registered for school and they start school, staying with a host family. But by and large, they're not registered until they're in one of the emergency shelters where they're able to be for an extended period of time. While they're at the airport or while they're with a host family, the kids aren't enrolled in school. Unless, as I said, it's a very long-term host. And then how long a period of time does it tend to be? So I think Eric said that within the cluster, it can be a matter of days or a week. For people who are hosting the way we are hosting, it's completely up to the host. We have a list of now over 60 people who have been hosting. And the time that they have offered ranges from a few days to a few months and everything in between. So it's completely up to the host to decide how long you want to host.
So Eric, my name's Sarah. I'm from Bedford, and very involved with the migrant families that were here at the hotel for months and months, and saw the amount of social services that we needed to provide. And it wasn't just trying to get on Mass Health, and it wasn't just trying to get SNAP benefits, but it was doctor's appointments, and it was lots of little moms who were very pregnant, when they showed up, and having to make sure that they got to a doctor's appointment, and then to be at the hospital when they were delivering and all that. And I like thinking about this model, but I just, having lived through so many months with these families and all their needs, I just was trying to figure out what the responsibility would be of hosting families related to all those services that they really need.
I mean, we can probably both speak to that. You want to go first, Eric, or you want me to?
Let me just say an anecdote. The host does not have responsibility, and at the same time, the host often chooses, to do this. But just one specific situation. So we're in Arlington, we were hosting somebody, and they had a meeting that they had to get to in Fall River, and they didn't tell us about it. They got there somehow. The T doesn't even begin to go to Fall River. I have no idea how they got there, but they did it. So just keep in mind that these folks have already traveled thousands of miles. A lot of them have walked through the Darien Gap, so they have a lot of capacity. Kathleen?
Yeah, I would echo that. I live in Dorchester, so it's much easier for me. We've got bus lines and T lines everywhere, right? So it's easier for me, but I have found our families profoundly resourceful. They often figure out for themselves how to use the T. I'm happy to show them if they need it. But in terms of the kinds of things that you identified, I've had the same experience, not as a host, but because Beyond was sort of being the support system for a hotel in Dorchester for many months. And that was what they call an unserviced shelter, which is what yours was too. But when the people are in host homes, the Brazilian Worker Center is responsible for getting them to any doctor's appointments or immigration appointments that they've got. And as I said, it's also a short-term commitment. And so the number of appointments or the number of things that come up is quite small. Just because it's a very limited amount of time. It's not months and months and months the way the support in the hotels has been.
Don, did you want to share online?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I'm just wondering again, you mentioned about the transportation. What about the little things like I guess grocery shopping and that sort of thing? How is that handled by the host? Or and secondly, I assume that these situations are pretty much 24/7. In other words, they don't get up in the morning and go off to some function. It's pretty much all day. Is that pretty much the case?
Yeah, in terms of food, we've paid for the groceries ourselves. I don't know, if somebody was hosting and they weren't able to pay for the groceries, they could certainly talk to the Welcome Center about it, but it hasn't been that much money, so we paid for it ourselves. And you're right, yeah, they're not going anywhere. So yeah, they're staying in the house pretty much most of the time. Does that answer your question?
Let me add a couple things though, if that's okay. So we have encouraged families who are hosting to early on in your host tenure, even if it's only 5 days, like the first day, if there's any place near you the family can get to by walking, like a playground in particular, to take them there so they understand how to get there and feel confident about going there on their own. If there's a grocery store walking distance, same idea. Like Eric, we've always taken people the first full day that they're with us to the grocery store so they can buy what they need to buy for their own groceries. Lately, I would say in the last like 4 months, the families who've arrived have a card they can use to buy their own groceries. Before that, we were paying for them, but now they can pay for their own groceries for the most part. They get benefits from the state to be able to do that. I will also say, however, that for any host who is concerned about laying out funds that are beyond your means, Beyond has money, my organization has money, and we will reimburse you. All we need is a receipt. So for instance, I have occasionally bought a stroller for families who have a toddler that they've been lugging around while they're carrying all of their stuff in a plastic garbage bag. And so I've gone out and bought a stroller, and Beyond will reimburse me for that. It's a couple of $100, and in terms of the 24/7, it's not to say the host is on duty 24/7. Working people who have school age kids are hosting. And so they're doing their lives. They're just, going about their business. They leave when they need to leave. They let the family know how to reach them if they need to. But the fact that they're staying in your home does not mean that you're having to stay in your home. You just make sure they know where everything is and how to get around within your home and how to use the internet, which is a really important thing for them. And then you go do your life, right? I mean, you're not tied down to your house. You can leave for whatever reason you need to.
And I guess one more question is, are they always families?
Yes. We are only working with families.
Thank you.
I mean, in some cases, it could be a couple with a pregnant woman, and no kids, but that's it. Just a couple other thoughts. Cleanliness. This may be anecdotal, but these are the cleanest people I've ever met. Like every time I cooked a meal, one of them would come up and sweep and mop the floor after I cooked. And I told them they didn't have to do it, but that was just like, that's what you do, you clean up. Kathleen mentioned this before, but I think it's important, I want to mention it again. The state has an emergency phone number. So, if something comes up in the middle of the night, there's a number you can call. You're not on your own that way. And also in terms of food, it was really nice to have a cluster because we go out to take the family shopping and then they could just take the food with them to the next household. So they didn't have to buy new stuff all the time. So I encourage you to think about next steps. And one really important thing about this is it takes some organizing, at least my model does. It doesn't happen by itself. You've got to, collect names, reach out to people, talk to people, could you take somebody, how many days a month would you feel comfortable taking somebody? Possibly connect across multiple congregations. If you have 2 households in one congregation and 3 in another, maybe it makes sense to get together and do this together. But it doesn't happen by itself. Somebody kind of has to take the initiative to make it happen.
So Eric, can I ask, so did Arlington Street Church, or did Arlington Church play a role in that coordinating?
Kind of. I mean, I used our mailing list to recruit people. So yeah. Yep.
And I'm sorry, Kathleen, maybe you've already explained this, but can you say again, just really quickly, what Beyond is?
Yeah, that stands for the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network, which I recognize as a mouthful. It was started in 2018 when all of the sort of vicious rhetoric from Trump as president escalated toward the migrants who at the time were coming up through Mexico in caravans. And Beyond began with the premise that nobody should be incarcerated simply for being a migrant. And so we have a bail bond fund, which is it's the only actual chunk of money we normally have is a bail bond fund. We are a network of volunteers. We don't have an office, we don't have staff, but we have a lot of, frankly, kick-ass volunteers. So we do a lot of I think, pretty amazing work as a network of several hundred people in the Boston area. And we continue to be quite focused on getting people out of immigrant detention, but obviously have expanded as the needs have expanded.
Thank you. So I have another question. One of the points that Reverend Annie Gonzalez, who serves here at First Parish, has made in conversations is that even if you feel that you are not able yourself to offer housing, that there are people that can be in support roles to lighten the load for other people that are in a place to offer housing. So can you speak a little bit to that, what a sort of next level out support role might look like?
So, oh, sorry, Eric, I can't see you right now, so I'm not sure if you're trying to talk. There we go.
I'll get started with that, and you can chime in.
Okay.
So I think that there are some specific roles that somebody who's not hosting can take on, and maybe a couple general ones. Certainly anybody with language skills is going to be a big help. Also, somebody who can drive people around, that's a big help. And the biggest thing is somebody who can do organizing, somebody who can say, okay, we've got this family covered for the next 10 days. Who's free after that? So kind of somebody who keeps the ball rolling. Kathleen, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, Beyond has other ways people can plug in as well. Sorry, my video. I hate to have people watch me hacking and coughing. We have a number of roles that people can plug into if they want to do support for migrants. And I will put Beyond's website in the chat as well, just to let you know. But for instance, we have a cohort of people who can be available to drive folks, to drive immigrants to a meeting with their immigration officer, to a medical appointment, to something else that they need a ride to. We have a cohort of people who are responding to needs for material collections. Usually that happens when the cold weather starts and people need, especially for their kids, they need boots and gloves and hats and jackets. So there's all kinds of other sorts of support you can do that aren't to do with the state office for immigrants and refugees, but are part of supporting the immigrants in our community. So I'll put Beyond's website in there as well.
Could I just ask of the people here and the people online, maybe just a show of hands, something like you think you might be able to host, or yeah, how many people think you might be able to host? So 2.5 here, and how about online? Yep, at least one.
It depends on my husband. Although I'm pretty persuasive. We also have a high level of chaos in our house. I'm just curious. I mean, I imagine the chaos that we have would still be a home, right? But I think that that's a hesitation on the part of other family members of mine who feel that the level of chaos is just not welcoming, sufficiently welcoming. But I guess that's a question, not just merely a comment, about how,
Is your home more chaotic than an airport terminal?
sometimes it feels that way, but probably not.
You know, I think it's just it's a question of discernment, right? It's a question of discernment. And sometimes you're at a space in your life or your situation is such that it just isn't the right time. With all the best will in the world, it's not the right time or circumstance, and that's okay. No harm, no foul. You know, there are other ways to plug in as well. So I think you just have to kind of weigh that, and you can always, you know, talk to one of us, Eric or myself, more explicitly about what you're talking about in terms of chaos, right? I will say if you have 6 dogs that are running around barking all the time, probably not a good place for people who've been traumatized.
No,
You know? So
no,
it depends on what we mean by chaos.
right, yeah, no, I think it's more our level of, you know, but we can create space for sure, and we have people come and stay with us, it's possible, so. I think the other question that I have too is just, my heart would want to have a long-term option for a family to be able to stay multiple months. So the kids, if there are older kids, they could go to school and just, and I don't know, you know, as each situation evolves with being a host to a family, then there may be more possibilities or lesser possibilities. I just, it just seems so difficult after all the trauma that that these families have gone through to shunt them off after a couple of days or a week or whatever. My heart would want that be longer. So I'm wondering, for longer term stays, how does that tend to work for the families and for the hosts involved? Is that, or is it mostly just a week here or a couple of weeks there type of situation?
It's mostly short term, but the people who decide to keep a family longer, who agree with that family to have them stay there longer, it tends to evolve. So, you know, maybe somebody who says we can have a, you know, family stay with us for a week, and then they say, oh, things are going really well, let's have them stay another 2 weeks or whatever. And then at the end of 3 weeks, they kind of go, are y'all comfortable here? Because we're really comfortable having you here. And then sometimes they just end up staying, right? And then other things kick in, like, all right, well, it's the middle of the school year. If you're going to stay here, then we need to figure out school, et cetera, et cetera. So that's very much an individual decision. And it's, I mean, flexibility is kind of the name of the game, right? Nobody's going to say you can't, right? There have been, the one situation I will say is challenging is that there was one host who, after their family was put into one of the emergency shelters, which, as I said earlier, is still a great big space. You don't have your own room, you can't cook, blah, blah, blah. It's not great. They said, hey, we love this family. Could they come back and stay with us for another week? And that's not a good idea, because once they're in the emergency shelter, they're on the runway toward more permanent housing. And if that runway gets disrupted, they lose their place in line, right? So there are issues like that that aren't ideal, but that they limit all of us. And honestly, I would also just say, again, this is back to discernment. We all have limits, and limits are good, right? I mean, you need to know where your limits are. We can push them out in directions that we choose to. Like if you're trepidatious about the idea of hosting, but you think, I really want to do this, you challenge your limits, right? You challenge yourself and you push those out a little bit. And there can be a huge amount of liberty in that. I mean, you have more space, right? You're pushing your boundaries out a little bit, but everybody's got them. And it's super important to know where your real limits are, because you're going to get mad or bent out of shape in some way, or someone else in your household is, if it gets beyond a space that you're okay with. And then obviously that devolves onto the family that you're trying to help. So, you know, be okay with having limits, and be okay with saying, the week is up. We've come to love you. I'm sorry. Good luck. That's tough, but it's still better than not hosting at all, right? I mean, it really is. It's a better thing to do.
And just to clarify, so all of these folks are waiting for a space in a shelter. So when when you say, okay, I can host this person longer, at some point, the state's going to call them up and say, hey, you're today's winner. And at that point, your role as the host is over. They're going to move out and move into the shelter.
Really, it's just an informational question. So I've always been curious as to how the families, what the sequence is. I mean, so they end up perhaps at Logan Airport, and is there like a waiting list? And so number one on the waiting list ends up getting a bed at a shelter if somebody from a shelter goes off someplace else. I mean, I just don't know what happens to these people.
There's some structure of waiting list, but the Welcome Center doesn't want to tell us exactly how it works because there are priorities. So, if a woman shows up who's 8.5 months pregnant, they're going to get a place before, somebody who's got a 7-year-old kid. So we always say, like, is this family? Like, are they close? And they say, oh, we can't tell you.
I will say one other thing too, Eric, that I don't even know if you know about this, but Beyond had got a grant a while ago to help with new arrivals, and we hadn't used it all. And we made the decision to give 10,000 of it back to the state. I mean, it didn't originally come from the state, but to the state to do weekend respite care for families. That is, they used the money to put people in hotel spaces for 3 days over a weekend, and they've done it now for multiple families. And it was their perception that to give lots of families a short break from the airport, to be in a space where they could shower and close a door, even though they couldn't cook, made sense. So they've done it with many families now. And I think that they're just monitoring who has had any kind of respite or not, right? So in terms of a waiting list, that's also the kind of thing that they're looking for. And I'm gonna bail. I'm sorry, but I need to go lie down again. So you have my email. Please feel free to email me, and I'll do anything I can to answer your questions and to support you in moving forward with this.
Thanks so much for doing this work.
Kathleen.
It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.
So I know that some of you are from this congregation, some of you are from Concord. I wonder if I could ask, is there somebody who can be kind of the contact person for this congregation? So if any of the folks who are online are interested.
So I can serve as the contact person for this congregation. Again, there's a clipboard here. If anyone wants to leave your information and your level of interest, I'm happy to gather that information and serve as a contact point for future organizing efforts.
Great. Regina, can you be contact person for Concord? And I really encourage you all to talk together because, like I say, if you can get 7 or 8 households together, you'll be very happy.
Well, one more quick question. I'm wondering, oh, sorry.
Sure, go ahead. I said sure, not sir, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just curious about how the process works to create a cluster and how, is there sort of an email thread or is there like some type of social connection, whether it's a site of some kind to have people communicate to support one another? Because what I'm hearing from you both is that there's a way in which the community holds one another and holds the families together, and that it creates a kind of interwoven fabric. But in order for that to happen, there needs to be communication and some kind of coherence around it. So I'm curious about how that works, whether you help people structure that. Is there sort of a model for it, a process, a workflow or something? I'm in high tech, so.
We're pretty informal. I mean, we have a Google group so we can email each other. And we have a WhatsApp group.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah.
So I will say, this is Reverend Jamie. For those of you who are First Parish members and friends, this congregation is pretty good at creating and organizing small groups and fostering small group coordination and communication, and the staff here would be happy to assist launching a cluster model and supporting it.
And I'll say too that my cluster, which we call Mariposa Butterfly Cluster, we're happy to do whatever we can to assist you as well. And that, that could also include, like, let's say you've got July all covered except for July 16th and 17th. You could call us and say, look, can you host these people for 2 days? And we could probably do that. So we could kind of have a little inter-cluster support.
So cluster of clusters model.
Cluster of clusters, yeah. We're going to take over the world. Other questions?
Hello?
Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I know this is going to sound extremely conservative, but is there anything going on that is going to help to change this flow of immigrants, or is it basically something that's going to be going on forever? I mean, I realize that's a government issue, not a local issue, but I just wonder if there's any possibility of that.
There might be other people who are better set to answer that question than me. All I know is that the governor, who actually lives like 2 blocks from me, has been saying over and over again, this is a congressional issue, this is a federal issue, and Congress needs to take action, and I agree with her. The country does not have a functional immigration policy, and we need one. And I mean, I guess there is the thing that Biden said where they're limiting people crossing the border to 2,500 a day. So that's probably a factor.
So but I think the main point that Eric made is that we need the immigrants, we need the labor. And so I think I just went to a talk by Michelle Cicola in Lexington. It was a LexRep talk where she said that for every 100 jobs that are open, there's only 48 unemployed people to apply for them. So the perception is that we have this flow of people that are going to take jobs away from people who already have them, when the reality is that we need the labor. I don't understand why we can't get the reality message out that we actually need this labor to survive economically in this country, and I don't why the Democrats can't get that message out. There's all of this xenophobia, the great replacement theory, that that's incorrect information, conspiracy theory stuff, and it's all emotional. But I can't understand why there's no way to get the facts out there so that people understand that people are not taking their jobs, they're not replacing them. They are just being part of the great melting pot and a nation of immigrants, which is what we've always been. So, anyhow.
Somebody asked online about going beyond First Parish. I think that's a great idea. I mean, we have, in Arlington, we have a nice connection with, I think it's called KB. It's the Humanist Jews. They meet at Fairweather School in Cambridge, and we've made a nice connection with them, and we have some folks from them in our cluster. I mean, I work pretty closely with LexRap in some ways, and I know, I mean, they were really busy supporting folks in a hotel in Lexington. I know that. I haven't heard about them doing any of this short-term hosting. Good organization, though. Yeah.
Eric, what kind of jobs do these people typically end up having?
One guy, Modelaire, that I know, just recently got hired as the head of housekeeping at the Marriott Hotel in Burlington. So I have a feeling he's going to be hiring a lot of his friends to do housekeeping. So I think that's probably a good example. Certainly, a lot of them become home health aides, CNAs. These are not the greatest jobs in the world, but for exactly that reason, if you think about the people who live on your street, how many of them want to get a job as a home health aide or doing housekeeping at the Marriott? None. So it's important that somebody do that work.
So basically, they take on the menial task.
Yeah.
So Don, in Bedford here, we had a number of people who got jobs. They just walked next door to Dunkin' Donuts or Dunkin'. They walked across when they were at the hotel. They walked across the street. A number of them started working at Stop and Shop. So in the plaza where
Market
they could
basket.
easily walk to. And then some ended up getting a T-bus, which was really right across the street from them to go into Cambridge or wherever. So I would agree that they're resourceful, certainly. They just need those, permission to work.
I had somebody, I'm trying to remember where she was from, but she didn't speak any language that was common around here. And we went to Market Basket, and I asked somebody there, do you hire people who speak Swahili or whatever it was? And they said, we hire people who speak anything.
So we're coming up on 7 o'clock. I want to be really respectful of your time, Eric. Are there any closing questions to address before we close out our evening together?
Just want to express appreciation again to you, Eric, as well, for this work, this life-saving work. And, we of privilege have an opportunity also to benefit from connecting with one another differently and giving up the great benefits that we have in our clear homes or our messy homes, whatever, but just being present for each other. So thank you so much for presenting to us and for creating this model, which seems like a really rich and rewarding one.
It's also just incredibly fun. I just have to say, you will have all kinds of interesting food and surprises and experiences. I appreciate your appreciation, and I don't want anybody to think that it's a burden. It's really a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Eric, and express thanks to Reverend Kathleen McTeague. I also want to definitely give thanks to our tech maestros, Bob and John, who have made it possible for us to meet this evening in this multi-platform format. So thank you so much, tech team. And thank you all for attending this evening here in Sanctuary and on Zoom. Again, there's sign-up information. You can also leave information in the chat. As more and more partners join in collaborating, we'll make sure that information gets around to everyone who's interested in connecting. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.